Hi everybody. I have to speak in English because I prepared my relation and my slides in English. So I think that my language won't be a problem for the Italian guests because my English is very low and linear for Italian-speaking people, but maybe could be a problem for English-speaking guests. So correct me if I'm wrong. This is another enormous task, democracy and liberty in United States just in the last 20 years, in the 2000s, since the 90s to 2013. And I think it's absolutely impossible to have a complete framework of this argument. But I have to limit my my speech to just important topics. I will not speak about blatant violation of personal freedom and individual liberty, like the IRS scandal or the NSA scandal, because this is not concerning democracy. Both NSA and IRS are non-elective bureaucracies, and so I think that this is not a problem of democracy, but a problem of authoritarianism inside democracy. What I would like to speak about is the problem concerning democracy, and so how the majority of American people vote to deprive the minority of rights and property. And this phenomenon is very, very sad, especially in the last years, and more and more evident, even to those who are skeptic about the libertarian theory. Fine. First of all, I would like to introduce what I mean for democracy versus liberty, because in it I have not to explain to you, because many people before me spoke about this kind of phenomenon. But I think it's useful to repeat it and to say it in few words. How democracy undermines liberty? First of all, since the founding fathers, it's crystal clear that democracy could undermine liberty through the tyranny of majority. So the majority would vote to deprive the minority of their rights, their properties, and their freedoms. And in the worst case scenario, which is the Hitler's Germany, the majority voted to deprive the minority of lives. And so I think that the tyranny of majority is not an abstraction, but it's a crystal clear danger. Okay, here we have a typical example of tyranny of majority, and this example is Obama's victory in 2012. In 2012, we have, for the first time, the majority of American people who voted for a socialist president. And this is the very first time since 1945, after Roosevelt, that the American people deliberately choose for a socialist president. Maybe he is not the first socialist in libertarian meaning of the term, because also many other presidents like Bill Clinton and the same George W. Bush, with his own socialist theory called, what was the name? Yes, the compassionate conservatism, which is the right-wing version of socialism. were all socialist. But I think that for Obama we have a different kind of president, because he is a self-assertive socialist, and American people knows that he is a statist president, a president who wants much more state in the life of individuals. Bush, for example, proclaimed himself as a conservative or even a libertarian, and many people believed in him. Afterwards, and secondly, Bush was the commander-in-chief during an ongoing war, and so many people, and the majority of people, voted for him just because during a war you cannot change the government, you cannot change the commander-in-chief. But for example, in the case of Obama, we have a first election in 2008, which could be considered a mistake also, because American people was tired about the war, and they were tired about the Republican government, and so they voted for the opposition. But in 2012 we don't have all these elements of disturb. We have 4 years of completely, clearly socialist administration, more state in the economy, more intrusions of the state in society, and after these 4 years, the American people, the majority of American people, choose for more state and less market and less society. But we have to go inside the data, because if you see the majority, you cannot have even an idea of what was the 2012 vote. This vote is well represented by this map. This map is vote by county. And so you can see clearly that the majority of counties in United States voted against Obama and for Mitt Romney. So they voted for the candidate that promised less state. And just a slight minority of counties voted for the candidate who actually wanted more state in United States. And why this situation? Because of the tyranny of majority. These few blue counties are counties which contains in itself not only the majority of urban population, but also the majority of people assisted by the state, people who own their money not by their own work, but by benefit, governmental benefit. And so there is also another phenomenon very clear in this kind of vote. In the blue counties, the urban areas of United States, we have the largest part of ethnic minorities. And ethnic minorities are not socialist in themselves for cultural reason or for traditional reasons, but they are statist, and they tend to be statist because for half a century, for 50 years, all the US administrations helped the minorities, the ethnic minorities, with subsidies and with many kinds of privileges. So we see that in urban areas with the highest concentration of Afro-American and Latin American population, we have a blue vote, a vote for the more statist of statists. Okay. And here we have some numbers to see how the tyranny of majority works in practice. These data are collected by the Index of Economic Freedom, which is an unbiased and scientifically sounded source. It's prepared and compiled by the Wall Street Journal and the Heritage Foundation. And the Index of Economic Freedom is interesting, first of all, because it can give freedom in numbers, in scores. And secondly, because the Index of Economic Freedom makes a comparative study. So you can see not only the United States, but United States compared to the other states in the world. And for this reason, I have taken my data from Index of Economic Freedom. First of all, we see tyranny in action, so the government spending. The red line is United States, and you can say, wow, spending is decreasing. No, no, this is not the case, because this is not the amount of spending, but this is the score of spending. The Index of Economic Freedom give a score to any kind of situation. So the less spending means the highest score. The less score means the highest spending. And you can see that the red line is declining, so the spending is growing and growing and growing. Even more interesting is that since 2009, the spending is growing since the government of the first administration of George W. Bush, and is still increasing. And there is a sharp decline of scores, so a sharp increase of spending under Barack Obama since 2009. And the most interesting and chilling thing is that we are joining a bad area, because since at 50, a score of 50, we have a free state. Under 50, we have a partly unfree state. So I think that in this particular area, United States are becoming an unfree state. And this is very alarming. Second, fiscal freedom. Here you have a value which is increasing. The red line, which is the United States, the black line is the world's average. The red line is higher, a bit stable, and even increasing. So the situation is not so dramatic as government spending. But I think that this is the great illusion of the United States system, because if you have more spending and the same amount of taxes, you have more debt, because state need money to spend money, and so the federal government is borrowing and borrowing and borrowing again. And here we have in this table we have a clear idea of what is the problem of national debt in United States. Since 1992 to 2012, the last official data of US debt, we have an increase from 200 million to 16 trillion of dollars. 16 trillion of dollars means 16,000 millions of dollars. In in Italian is 16.000 miliardi di dollari, giusto per rendere l'idea se non si è capito il concetto. And I think that we are crossing a red line after which the United States citizen cannot anymore repay their debt. And also because if we compare the national debt to the GDP, the Grand Domestic Product, we see that it is reaching very quickly the 100% of GDP. And so what the United States citizens are producing is still debt. Okay, and here we have a last factor, which is monetary freedom. Monetary freedom means freedom from inflation. The more money is produced by central bank, the less we are free. Okay? And in monetary freedom, we see that there was a relatively stable and even positive situation since 2009 compared to other banks, not compared to gold standard, of course. But if we compare the situation in United States to other central banks, like European central banks and the other national central banks, we see that there is a relatively positive situation given a relatively anti-inflationist policy. Even this factor is declining since 2009 because we have a sharp decline of monetary freedom. And now United States reached the world average, which is not a good news, and the situation is likely declining even in the next years because the new governor of the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, is the architect of the monetary policy of the last years, and she's an orthodox Keynesian, and she already declared that she wants and she will help the growth with monetary policies. What does it mean? It means that she wants to produce even more money in the next years. Okay, and but no panic, because overall, if you compare United States to other present-day nation states, you will see that United States is still one of the freest nations in the world, one of the 10 freest nations of the world, to be clear. And you see that, of course, there are some difficulties in this graph, but if you see the red line, which means United States, and the black line, which means the world average, the United States are still free. Okay, fine. Now we see that Houston, we have a problem. We have a problem, of course, but it's possible to come back on track. It's possible to redress the problems with current methods and current politics, and so we can see. But first of all, I would like to speak just a little to what we cannot do and we have to avoid to do. First of all, no panic. United States are still a free nation. When I listen my libertarian friends in United States and they think to live in the worst of tyranny and in the less free state in the world, I usually say them, okay, come here in Italy, stay here for just 2 to 3 years, not as a guest, not as a VIP, but as a normal citizen. Try to start your own business, try to find a work, and then come back to United States, and you will live in another nation and in a better nation. Okay, and I think that this is the most important argument, because we don't have to compare the present-day United States to a theoretical libertarian model, minimal state or anarchy, or a complete capitalistic anarchy, because it's impossible to compare it, because not because it's impossible to achieve this this goal, let me clear, but because the culture of the 99% of people is not libertarian. So it could be an illusion to say we are suffering because we are far from a model of minimal state, or we are far from anarchy. And secondly, because secondly, we don't have to compare the present-day United States to the Founding Fathers' 13 colonies, because of the same reason said before, because the culture is changed really, and the world is changed, and so you have to adopt methods who are compatible to present-day mentality and not the 18th century mentality. Otherwise, you will despair, and you cannot address any problem. First of all, the first method that you can use to limit the power of the state is use democracy against democracy. Grover Norquist, who is the founder and leader of the Americans for Tax Reform, is maybe the better example of using democracy against democracy. What does it mean, using democracy against democracy? It means use successfully public choice policies and public choice taxes. Grover Norquist made a very simple thing. If you want to be elected, you have to promise to not raise taxes. And so, and I will control your action. If you raise taxes, you will be beaten in the next election. And this system worked. As we saw in one of the previous graphs, previous table, Fiscal Freedom is the only one who remained stable in the last 20 years, because politicians are scared. If I raise taxes, people will not vote for me. Okay, the second current method is grassroots movements inspired by US Constitution, which is very libertarian indeed. And the main example, but not the only one, is the Tea Party movement, which is a grassroots movement, a popular movement, is not at all an elite, and based on the values and the policies and the laws of USA Constitution. This is very useful because the largest part of present-day politicians and judges also tend to forget what are the main principles of US Constitution, which is very libertarian. And so it's very important to have a grassroots movement who keep them back on track. Another method are explicitly anti-statist politicians, and we have had in the last month just 2 examples of what I mean. Rand Paul, whose incredible action of and performance of filibuster against the nomination of John Brennan at the head of CHIA is an example of struggle inside the institution. The other example, even more recent, is Ted Cruz, who opposed the financing of healthcare law, and he spoke for more than 20 hours to block this process. I think that the example of consistent anti-statist politicians inside the Congress, inside the institutions, is very important for the defense of freedom. Another example of resistance with current methods is individual state level resistance. Individual and state level resistance, sorry. We saw it in action during the shutdown when the federal government, lacking the last budget, forcibly shut down a lot of public activities. And we saw many individuals, private companies, and even entire states like the Wisconsin, who refused to obey to governmental orders and kept their activities alive and running. So I think that 10, 100, and 1,000 shutdowns could improve the cause of freedom. Another method we saw in the last years is local pressure for independence. We saw, for example, tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of people in Texas and Louisiana and many other states, of course, but Texas and Louisiana were more consistent in this battle. Many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people signed petitions for independence in November 2012, immediately after the re-election of Barack Obama. Of course, a secession is politically impossible because the Constitution forbid it, but state-level pressure for independence is a good method to achieve more freedom. At least at state level. And then we see the importance of anti-statist popular culture. We saw, for example, a lot of references to 1984, George Orwell's dystopian novel, which is not a libertarian novel because George Orwell was a consistent collectivist, but it's a warning against the power, the total power of state. And so I think that the other one example is The Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, which is maybe considered as the Bible of current libertarians and one of the main references also for the Tea Party movement. But we have a problem also here in this field because they are very old novels. They are both written in the first half of 20th century, and we need more pop culture for freedom, of course. So I think that one of the main tasks of current libertarians is write books, write novels, and produce movies, because this is very important in policies, just to shape the popular culture. And one last thing, ideas have consequences. We have a lot of champions of freedom in 20th century, very important for the modern battle of liberty. And we have Ludwig von Mises, Ayn Rand, Friedrich von Hayek, Murray Rothbard. And the main problem in this field is the struggle against each others, because Ludwig von Mises ignored the work of Ayn Rand and also of Rothbard. Rothbard was against Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand excommunicated Rothbard. So we saw a lot of struggles between classical liberals and libertarians. We have now to cross this line. We have to evolve, and the most important thing to do is to teach them all, because they are all important for the cause of individual liberty and freedom. Ideas have consequences, so I think that like socialism gained a unique position of cultural hegemony in 20th century, and its hegemony is still continuing. Libertarianism too has to conquer the hegemony of the present day thinking. And this is the last way to transform democracy from an enemy of freedom to an ally of freedom, because if people think really that freedom is better than socialism, they can vote for freedom. And I think that ideas have consequences, so I'm a bit more optimistic than other people here in this room. Thank you very much, and bye.